The Godfather restaurant scene is one of the most famous executions in movie history, and almost none of it would actually work. The gun, the plan, the ballistics, the human stress response. 7 things are secretly broken in this scene, and we are pulling every single one of them apart. This video examines firearms strictly as historical movie props and within a film analysis context. It is not about real-world use, tactics, or instruction. If you notice when movies nail the details or completely miss them, this is the kind of channel to subscribe to. You remember the setup. Michael Corleone retrieves a hidden gun from the bathroom, sits back down across from Sollozzo and Captain McCluskey, and fires 3 shots that change the entire story. 7 things are actively working against him at this restaurant. We are going to count every single one. Starting with number 7, the tape trigger. The gun Clemenza hands Michael in the basement is a Smith & Wesson Model 36. That is a 5-shot revolver chambered in .38 Special with a 2-inch barrel and a J-frame design. It weighs about 19 ounces unloaded, barely over a pound. For 1940s and 1950s, New York, this class of snub-nose revolver was common among plainclothes detectives and organized crime figures because it was small enough to tuck under a jacket or slide into a waistband without printing through clothing. The film actually gets that selection right. A full-size military pistol at a sit-down dinner would create a visible bulge and raise immediate suspicion from Sollozzo or McCluskey. Here is what the film gets wrong. In the basement, Clemenza explains the gun is cold, meaning no registration and untraceable. He says he put special tape on the trigger and the butt so Michael will not leave fingerprints. Michael tries to pull the trigger for the first time, and it does not fire. He struggles with it visibly. Clemenza laughs and asks if the trigger is too tight. Michael finally yanks it hard enough, and the gun goes off. He flinches and complains about his ears ringing. That tape detail is genuinely fascinating because it was real organized crime tradecraft from that era. Wrapping electrical tape or friction tape around the grip and trigger area was a documented method to prevent latent fingerprints from adhering to metal surfaces. In the 1940s, fingerprint recovery from blued steel was possible, but far from reliable without modern dusting powders and chemical fuming techniques. So the tape had a legitimate forensic purpose. The problem is what tape physically does to a revolver. A factory-stock Smith & Wesson J-frame in double action already has a trigger pull weight of 10 to 12 pounds, which is heavy even for an experienced shooter. Tape adds friction, inconsistency, and bulk to the trigger surface. It bunches up under pressure, stretches unpredictably, and sticks to skin. Armorers and firearms historians who have replicated this exact test consistently find the same thing. A tape trigger can push the effective pull weight to 15 or even 20 pounds, and can sometimes bind the internal sear mechanism entirely if the tape shifts during the stroke. Michael has never performed a close-range execution. The film and the Puzo novel both make this clear. He is a Dartmouth-educated Marine captain with combat ribbons from the Pacific, but combat experience with a service rifle on a battlefield is a completely different skill set, from pulling a heavy taped revolver trigger 3 feet from 2 armed men watching your hands. When adrenaline floods the body, fine motor control disappears almost immediately. Your fingers feel thick, clumsy, and unresponsive. Your grip strength becomes erratic. A 10 to 12 pound trigger pull is already at the upper edge of what trained shooters can manage smoothly under acute stress. Adding layers of tape turns the first critical shot into something that may not even discharge. Shooters who have run tape trigger drills under timed stress conditions report failure to fire rates above 30% on the very first pull. But the trigger is not even the biggest problem. Wait until you hear what that bathroom did to the gun. Number 6. The bathroom environment. The gun is not handed directly to Michael at the table. It is planted behind the toilet tank, fastened to the porcelain with tape. During actual filming, Coppola deliberately moved the prop gun to a different spot moments before cameras rolled so that Pacino's frantic searching and visible panic would look completely genuine on screen. That is a brilliant and now legendary filmmaking detail. The real-world problem is what a 1940s Bronx restaurant bathroom does to a steel revolver over even a short period. These rooms were not climate-controlled. Steam drifting from the kitchen, constant hand-washing, toilet flushing cycling moisture into the air, cold winter drafts from outside. All of it creates a high humidity environment. Metal surfaces develop condensation quickly under those conditions. Even within the short window the gun sat behind that tank, moisture could form on the cylinder face, inside the chambers, and around the primer pockets of the 5 loaded rounds. The .38 special primers manufactured in that era were non-corrosive, but still sensitive to moisture exposure. Condensation wicking into the primer compound can cause light strikes, where the firing pin does not generate enough force to ignite the round, or hang fires, where the round detonates with a dangerous delay. Combine that moisture buildup with tape that has now become tacky and gummy from the humid air, and Michael has to draw a sticky, potentially unreliable weapon from his waistband and fire it with precision at 2 armed men sitting 3 to 4 feet away. Real organized crime operations almost never hid weapons in public restrooms for exactly these reasons. They used car compartment traps, apartment stash points, or body carriers. Mob carpenters, according to multiple accounts from the era, would build hidden compartments inside car doors or wall panels at friendly locations. A toilet tank in a public restaurant that strangers use throughout the evening is about the least controlled environment you could choose for staging a weapon. The bathroom plant was cinematic, not operational. So Michael is pulling a sticky, potentially unreliable weapon from his waistband. And the round inside it is way less powerful than you think. Number 5. The ballistic performance. Clemenza tells Michael he wanted a short barrel with a lot of blasting power. The short barrel part is accurate. The blasting power is largely an illusion. A standard 1940s .38 special round with a 158 grain lead, round-nose bullet fired from a 2-inch barrel produces a muzzle velocity of roughly 700 to 850 feet per second and delivers around 200 to 250 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. That is actually less energy than many modern .380 ACP loads are produced. Even hotter loads only reach about 900 to 950 feet per second from a snub-nose barrel. That energy level is adequate for close-range torso hits on an unprotected person. Headshots are a completely different matter. The human frontal bone is dense, thick, and naturally angled. A .38 special round from a 2-inch barrel striking the forehead at even a slight angle has a documented tendency to deflect along the curve of the skull or stop in the bone rather than penetrating cleanly into the brain. Ballistic gelatin testing using FBI standard protocol shows that .38 special projectiles from 2-inch barrels frequently fail to expand properly because the velocity drops below the threshold needed to reliably open the bullet. Penetration averages 12 to 15 inches, sufficient for a torso shot, but skull geometry makes headshot outcomes far less predictable than the film portrays. The round Clemenza loaded was most likely a standard lead round nose, which does not expand at all. It just punches a .357-inch diameter hole and relies entirely on placement and velocity to do damage. At the reduced velocity a 2-inch barrel produces, that is a very thin margin of performance for the kind of guaranteed instant incapacitation the scene requires. And the historical data on what .38 seconds actually did to people in this era is even worse. Number 4. Historical stopping power data. Compiled records from the NYPD, the FBI, and independent researchers spanning the 1930s through the 1960s show that .38 caliber snub-nose revolvers had one-shot stop rates in only the 50 to 60% range against determined individuals. Multiple documented cases exist of people absorbing 2, 3, even 4.38 caliber rounds to the head or neck and continuing to function for seconds or even minutes afterward. In the film, Michael delivers a clean forehead shot on Sollozzo that drops him instantly, then a throat shot followed by a top of skull shot on McCluskey. Realistically, that throat shot strikes cartilage, muscle, and major blood vessels. McCluskey could retain 5 to 10 seconds of physical ability to react, reach for a weapon, or grab Michael across the table. 5 seconds is an eternity when you are sitting across the table from someone in that kind of encounter. So Michael needs follow-up shots. The problem is he has never actually practiced with this gun. Number 3. Follow-up shots and recoil management. The recoil from a lightweight 19-ounce snub-nose revolver firing hot .38 special loads is sharp and snappy. The muzzle flips upward aggressively after each round. Recovering back onto target for a second and third shot requires genuine practice and familiarity with that specific firearm. Michael has never fired this particular gun before the single basement test, and even then he only pulled the trigger one time. At dinner table distance, point shooting is possible in theory, but the short 2-inch barrel offers almost zero forgiveness for misalignment. NYPD training data from the 1940s showed that experienced, seasoned officers averaged only 20 to 30% hit rates on full man-sized targets at 7 yards under stress with snub-nose revolvers. Michael's closer than 7 yards, certainly, but he is also a complete amateur with this particular weapon, drawing from a seated position out of a waistband, targeting 2 people who are reacting and moving. The short sight radius of a 2-inch barrel magnifies every tiny error in hand alignment. Even a millimeter of cant at the muzzle translates to missing the intended point of impact by inches at close range. Under adrenaline, hand tremors and jerky trigger pulls make those small errors almost inevitable. And all of this assumes the plan itself made any sense. According to an actual mob associate, it did not. Number 2. The operational plan. Former Gambino family associate Anthony Ruggiano Jr. discussed this exact scene in a detailed interview and called the entire restaurant execution pure Hollywood. He explained that killing a police captain, even a thoroughly corrupt one like McCluskey, was something real crime families avoided at virtually any cost because of the devastating law enforcement backlash it would trigger. Real hits on high-value targets in 1940s and 1950s, New York typically involved 2 or 3 experienced shooters working as a team, never a solo first-timer. They favored .22 caliber pistols for quiet close-range work or shotguns for vehicle ambushes. The approach was straightforward: walk up, fire, leave immediately. Sitting down for a full Italian dinner, making extended conversation, excusing yourself to a bathroom, retrieving a hidden weapon, returning to the table, and then executing 2 people in a dining room full of civilian witnesses is essentially the opposite of how real contract killings were structured. Dropping the untraceable revolver at the scene was actually smart and did align with real practice. The tape on the grip reduced fingerprint risk meaningfully. 1940s forensic ballistics could match a revolver to a bullet through lands, grooves, and twist rate, but individual microscopic markings were harder to identify on revolvers than on semi-automatic pistols because the cylinder and forcing cone do not leave as consistent a signature on the projectile. So leaving the gun behind made solid forensic sense. Smart move leaving the gun, but it does not matter when the room is full of people who just watched you do it. Number 1. The witnesses and the aftermath. Michael walks out of the restaurant at a deliberate slow pace in the film. In reality, the entire dining room erupts the instant the first shot cracks off. The waiter, kitchen staff, any other patrons present, everyone is screaming and scrambling for exits or hitting the floor. Bronx precinct response time in the 1940s was measured in just a few minutes. Michael's driver is waiting outside at the curb, but the citywide law enforcement mobilization following a police captain's murder would be immediate, massive, and relentless. Real organized crime families understood this deeply and avoided targeting law enforcement for decades specifically because of it. 7 factors, every single one working against the success of this scene if it played out with real physics, real ballistics, real human stress responses, and real operational tradecraft. The tape trigger binding under pressure, the humid bathroom degrading the ammunition and the tape, the marginal stopping power from a snub-nose barrel, the unreliable one-shot incapacitation data from that era, the amateur shooter experiencing peak adrenaline, the solo execution plan with zero backup, and the witness-filled restaurant with rapid police response minutes away. Stack those together, and the most likely real-world outcome is not the clean, mythic turning point the audience watches on screen.